Good morning and welcome to People's Church. I am glad you are here. As we begin, I invite you to do two things. I invite you to remove a distraction. Maybe that is setting your phone across the room or writing down that thing that you were going to try to remember to do later. And I invite you to do something that helps you feel more comfortable, more present, more ready for this day. Maybe that's a stretch or a few smooth breaths. Whoever you are, whatever you believe, whoever you love, you are welcome here. And I know many of us show up to this moment with burdens. We are weary from nearly 2 years of pandemic life. Maybe we were up most of the night with our own anxieties or with a small person. Many of us are navigating exposures to COVID and other illnesses in our close circles right now and making hard choices about risks and connection and how to show up for each other. Many of us are grieving. The past few weeks have been marked by big losses of icons and exemplars and many smaller losses in our circles as well. It is a hard time. And maybe you show up with joy and contentment. And I hope that is true. I hope you come this morning having seen or driven through the snow and felt joy and the beauty and peace of this season. All of that, whoever you are, however you feel, you are welcome. Come, let us gather. Come, let us worship together.
Welcome to this opportunity to be together in community, which is a time of joy, comfort, and sometimes challenges. People's Unitarian Universalist Congregation is a place where we come to learn more about being human. We're not here because we've figured out life's questions or because we think we've got it right. My name is Becky Moffett-Moore. I'm from the Sunday Services Committee. I would like to extend a welcome to everyone gathered here this morning, though we are spread afar, whether you are new or a regular at People's Church. To those of you who are visitors to our services or here for the first time, thank you for being with us here this morning. We come here to learn more about being in relationship with each other, how to listen, how to forgive, how to be vulnerable, and how to create trust and compassion in one another. Now let us move into worship, willing to be authentic with each other, honest within ourselves, and open to connection in all its forms.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near.
If you're lighting a chalice at home, you're encouraged to type in the chat box, a chalice is lit in your neighborhood, on your street, in your city. A Fire in the Universe by Sean Trapp. Our chalice reminds us of the fire within ourselves is the same fire that illuminates the universe. It is our reminder that all is connected, even though the space of the void is vast, and our experience here is but a blimp in the cosmic timeline. This flame is our promise that in our smallness, in our short time on this earth, that we live intensely and deeply with love for one another, with honesty and integrity, to be guided by rational thought and critical thinking, and with a sense of shared responsibility.
Our story this morning is called Mullah Nasruddin Feeds His Coat. And it is one of my favorite wisdom stories. And it's a story from the Sufi tradition. Sufism is a mystical strain within Islam. Mullah Nasruddin was a teacher, but he was also a farmer. And one day he was out working in his fields, and like farmers do, he got very muddy. He was working hard and lost in thought and forgot about the time. Now that night in his village, there was going to be a big banquet. Everyone was bringing food and they would all share and dine together. He looked at he realized the time and realized he did not have time to get the mud off his boots and off his clothes and go show up clean. So he went to this banquet covered in the dirt of the fields. And he got there and people didn't greet him warmly. They didn't offer him a plate of food. They didn't pull out a chair to give him a place to sit. He felt as though he might be invisible in that moment. And so he didn't want to stay at this party. He went home and he got his finest coat and put on the fine coat and went back to the party. This time when he arrived, it was like everyone could see him. They greeted him warmly. A few different people prepared him plates of food and brought them to him. And it seemed like everybody wanted him to sit right next to them. And so he noticed this change and thought it was strange. Oh, the ringing for those of you who are nearby is a doorbell. So everybody in the room is checking their phones as a ringing goes off. And so as he sits down, he takes the food and he puts it in his coat and says, "Eat, coat, eat. Eat, coat, eat. Eat, coat." And everybody looks at him very strangely, like you would if someone was putting food in their coat. And it probably wasn't a food quite as tidy as these apples. So putting sauces and salads and all kinds of things into his coat. And they said, "Mullah Nasruddin, what are you doing?" And he said, "You did not even see me or offer me food when I was in my dirty clothes from the field, but I wear my finest coat and you offer me food? I assumed you wanted my coat to eat because it was only for the coat, not for me, right?" And the people at first were confused. And then they thought about it and said, "Oh yeah, we did act differently when he was dressed fancy than when he was dirty. And maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we should welcome everyone always. And so the people in that story learned their lesson, and us in retelling it learn a similar lesson. That is our story for today. I'm going to take off these apples and this coat. People are generous people. And the last few weeks have brought COVID exposures or COVID diagnoses to many of the families of young children in our congregation. Omicron and school attendance are a risky combination. And through it all, people have been showing up for each other. A people's person made what I assume was gallons upon gallons of chicken and wild rice soup and delivered it to households where people were quarantined. Someone brought my family a care package of candy and coloring books and other good things for quiet times at home. And others, I know yesterday there was an emergency frozen chicken nugget delivery to a household where everyone had lost their sense of taste, and that was the only thing one of the children was willing to eat. We show up. It is hard. Sometimes in this moment, it feels impossible to know what the right choices are as we navigate risk upon risk upon risk. But sometimes love shows up like soup or candy or chicken nuggets. And that is one of the ways we are caring for each other in this impossible time. So I invite you to continue to be the generous people that you are and show up for those within our church and beyond who need extra care right now, and to support the good and important work of this church. So the offering will now be received. Those of you who are on Zoom will see a link to give. And if you are in person, I invite you to give via the donations box kind of on the out as you leave the comments. Thank you all for being the generous people that you are.
That was a beautiful offertory. Thank you very much, Savannah. Now let us all give thanks for all that sustains us. From the countless gifts we each have been given, gifts of life and love and sustenance, we bring these small portions to share in the works of love, which none of us can accomplish alone.
People's Church supports one another in good times and hard times and the in-between times. One of the ways that we do that is by taking time during our services to lift up the joys and sorrows and milestones in our lives. So if you have a joy, sorrow, milestone you wish to share with our community, I invite you, if you are on Zoom, to type it into the chat. If you are in person, there's paper and pens and a basket in the front of the room. And if you would rather be held in care of this community without naming the particular going on in your life, you are invited to do that as well. Just say or name that you'd like a stone placed. Sources of reason and radiance, sources of courage and compassion, keep watch with those who work or watch or weep this day. May the suffering be soothed. May the weary find rest. May the sick be tended. May the dying and those who love them find peace. And may the joyous be shielded. And may all of us know that we are wrapped in a love that surrounds us always, a web that connects us to all that exists. Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist monk and teacher, died this week. And so we are using one of his prayers in our service. This prayer is his adaptation of a traditional Buddhist metta, loving kindness meditation. The same pattern repeats several times. We will pray for ourselves, someone else, and then another group. And in the full meditation, we would repeat the you and the they sections several times. The first you would be for a person that we like, then a person we love, then a person who is neutral to us, and then a person we suffer when we think of. And the theys would be repeated, and for a group, a people, or a nation, or a species that we like, then one that we love, then one that is neutral to us, and finally, one we suffer when we think of. And we aren't doing that full meditation now, but I commend it to you. I find it transformative to pray for the people that I think of as my enemies, a breath after praying for the people that I love. So this is the 9 prayers by Thich Nhat Hanh. May I be peaceful, happy, and light in body and in spirit. May you be peaceful, happy, and light in body and in spirit. May they be peaceful, happy, and light in body and in spirit. May I be free from injury. May I live in safety. May you be free from injury. May you live in safety. May they be free from injury. May they live in safety. May I be free from disturbance, fear, anxiety, and worry. May you be free from disturbance, fear, anxiety, and worry. May they be free from disturbance, fear, anxiety, and worry. May I learn to look at myself with the eyes of understanding and love. May you learn to look at yourself with the eyes of understanding and love. May they learn to look at themselves with the eyes of understanding and love. May I be able to recognize and touch the seeds of joy and happiness in myself. May you be able to recognize and touch the seeds of joy and happiness in yourself. May they be able to recognize and touch the seeds of joy and happiness in themselves. May I learn to identify and see the sources of anger, craving, and delusion in myself. May you learn to identify and see the sources of anger, craving, and delusion in yourself. May they learn to identify and see the sources of anger, craving, and delusion in themselves. May I know how to nourish the seeds of joy in myself every day. May you know how to nourish the seeds of joy in yourself every day. May they know how to nourish the seeds of joy in themselves every day. May I be able to live fresh, solid, and free. May you be able to live fresh, solid, and free. May they be able to live fresh, solid, and free. May I be free from attachment and aversion, but not be indifferent. May you be free from attachment and aversion, but not be indifferent. May they be free from attachment and aversion, but not be indifferent. So ends our time of meditation with words.
Find a stillness, hold a stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find the silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony. Seek the essence, hold the essence, let the essence carry me. Let me flower, help me flower, watch me flower, carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony.
In 1995, the Reverend Fred Campbell, who was the interim minister at People's Church at the time, and was the carpenter behind all of our nice pedestals that we use in the Commons, led an adult religious education class called the Four Faiths. And we are using the four faith categories from his framework: humanist, mystic, naturalist, and theist in a series of services. Nearly half of the church at that time participated in this class, and it helped people come to recognize the theological diversity within the church and to find kinship and put words to their beliefs that they hadn't found words for before. And so we are exploring some of the same ideas with hopefully some of the same goals in our series. The humanist service was a few weeks ago, and it was rich and meaningful. So if you missed it, I invite you to visit the church's YouTube page for that. And today we're focusing on mysticism, which means this is an open invitation for the religious naturalists and so for the people who find their meaning in nature, and the theists, the people who find their meaning in God or goddesses or higher powers of one form or another, to think about offering their own reflection. Please be in touch with me if that is compelling to you. So in the curriculum that Fred Campbell wrote, he included this paragraph. A thread that led to the formation of the course is that in my experience, many Unitarian Universalists know what they do not believe, but cannot say what they do believe. They know where they come from, but do not know where they are now. This inability to articulate the faith that is sustaining one's living is, it seems to me, a distinct impediment to spiritual health. Fred continues, it also occurred to me that one of my legitimate tasks as a minister is to help and encourage individuals to articulate their faith and then to move to deepen it, so that when the crises of living come, they will have a vital and more than adequate resource to draw upon. So it is my hope, speaking for Rachel again and not Fred, that this series of services will help all of us come to understand what we believe and the resources that we have, the spiritual resources we have to draw on when the crises come. So let us today explore mysticism and the faith of mystics. We begin with two reflections from People's People. And we'll begin with the words from Alan Parcells, who's a longtime member of People's Church, who attended the original Four Faiths class in 1995. And he currently is living in assisted living in Lowell and asked me to read his words. This is Alan. Imagine me as Alan. When I first read Reverend Rachel's item about a reprise of Fred Campbell's Four Faiths, I dug out my copy of the 1992 workbook for review. At that time, I was still under the influence of Roger Greeley and his brand of humanism. And since then, much has happened to change my belief structure, although I am still a Unitarian Universalist in terms of rejecting Trinity, original sin, and salvation. I do not accept a God as some sort of geyser up in the sky jump-starting Adam. I have had at least one personal experience which is not explained by a strictly scientific reason. On Halloween in 1994, my first wife, Lynn Parcells, dropped dead in the laundry room while I was out shopping. I should mention that prior to this point, she had been actively engaged in publishing activities in Mensa, and I had created a photograph of her and stored it in my computer for future use. She had a computer of her own that she routinely used. And shortly after her death, I booted up my computer, and instead of getting the usual Windows image, what should appear but a photo of Lynn. This is the first and only time this has occurred. And around this same time period, a friend of Lynn's in Battle Creek had a vision of her saying farewell, although that could have been drug-induced. Interestingly enough, while Lynn was still alive, her mother died, and Lynn experienced a similar vision of farewell. She related this to her stepfather in Grand Rapids in the presence of a family friend. And this friend was a member of Fountain Street Church, who also had a vision of farewell, but had been unwilling to relate it to her friends at that church. Fountain Street is a liberal church in Grand Rapids, similar to People's in many ways. Alan continues, over the years, these events have caused me to shift to a scientific naturalism faith. As one scientist put it, I am the stuff of stars. I marvel at the various images from the Hubble Space Telescope and look forward to seeing what the new Webb telescope will reveal. My Unitarianism has created some difficulties with Ginger's family when called upon to say grace at the dinner table. I haven't been in a conventional prayer mode for many years, least of all ending in Jesus' name. I'd given thanks to a creator of the universe, but one of my daughters-in-law has quit asking me to say grace in recent years. So it goes. And now we hear from Mary Montgomery Clifford.
The definition of mysticism is direct, immediate experience of ultimate reality. And that certainly describes my own introduction to mysticism and mystical experience. I grew up in a Catholic family, very Catholic. 3 aunts, a great aunt, and a cousin were nuns Catholic. A brother in the seminary Catholic. A St. Odilo parochial school catechism Catholic. Then in the 7th grade, my world changed. I experienced deep and profound connection with the divine. I had not sought out this connection. It just happened. I suddenly was gripped with the knowledge that God did not care if you glorified the deity. God did not care if you believed or disbelieved. God did not care what religion or non-religion you were. The only thing that God cared about was how we love one another. It was like there were 2 Marys, the Mary before the mystical experience, who followed the rules and the dogma, and the Mary after the experience, who now saw a bigger picture, one that was above and beyond all rules and all dogma. That was the beginning of my journey into mysticism, a journey that it continues to guide and nourish me today. For indeed, Ralph Waldo Emerson was right. Life is a journey, not a destination. The journey of mysticism and that deep knowledge that what really matters is how we love one another propelled me to explore and to experience, but also to question and to doubt. It has not always been a comfortable journey. In high school at Nazareth Academy, a religion teacher labeled me a heretic for asking the wrong questions. At the University of Illinois, it was secular dogmas that I questioned. On the other hand, my grounding in the mystic has meant exploring a cornucopia of mystical and spiritual experiences. For years, I even wrote a column about them entitled Cyberwave, Spirituality and the Internet. And my deep knowing that all that really matters is how we love each other led me to be part of a team that launched a chain of bilingual Spanish-English community newspapers with the goals of building bridges of understanding and of working to make communities safer and more just. Later, it led me to being a public relations consultant to nonprofits devoted to working with at-risk young people and their families. And eventually it led to my joining People's Church because my mystic self feels welcome here. And because of People's Church's dedication to justice and therefore to love of one another. One of my mentors was the late Wayne Teasdale, a Catholic lay brother who in his all too brief life was an activist and teacher dedicated to building a common bond between religions through a focus on mysticism. In his book, Mystic Heart, Discovering a Universal Spirituality in the World's Religions, Wayne stated that mystical spirituality has many types, each valid in its own way. There is natural mysticism, in which the natural world provides an external medium through which we may seek and encounter the divine, and through it, the divine also seeks contact with us. I myself find that many of my mystical experiences are found through intimate connections with nature. There is theistic mysticism, in which the goal is union and communion with God. And there is mysticism of knowledge. Unrelated to God or a divine being, it concerns the realization in consciousness itself of ultimate wisdom and compassion. Humanists may resonate with this one. And so perhaps Brother Wayne was right when he wrote, everyone of us is a mystic. We may or may not realize it. We may not even like it. But whether we know it or not, whether we accept it or not, mystical experience is always there, inviting us on a journey of ultimate discovery. Thank you for listening to my journey. I hope it provides full food for thought and perhaps an invitation to experience.
Six years ago, I went to midnight mass on Christmas Eve at St. Luke's Church downtown. My eldest child was an infant then, and since we were up most of the nights anyway, why not have him at church? And he started crying with hunger during the service. So I started nursing my little one there in the pew in that beautiful sanctuary. Not much later, it was time for communion. And so I made my way forward in the nice orderly lines to the communion rail, ready to receive the wafer and the wine. And my child continued to nurse. The priest offered me the small disc of bread of heaven, he said, before placing it on my tongue. Before that day, I'd been pretty neutral to ambivalent on the communion ritual. It was something I did with my spouse. It was important to him, and so we do these things. But that day, it was different. The wafer sat on my tongue, dissolving, And I felt a profound kinship that is hard to put into words. I ate this spiritual food that represents Christ's body as my child was eating from my body. And I felt connection, a connection to a long line of ancestors who had birthed and fed and sustained others. I felt connection to everyone else celebrating the Holy Infant that night, and everyone up late with regular infants that night too. And I knew myself, my body, my child, everyone to be holy too, a part of a holy lineage that existed long before us and would continue long after us. 2 years ago, almost to the day, we held a service here in the Commons focused on holding on to joy when there are so many reasons for despair. If we had only known how much we would need that. And after I preached, we had the mosaic ritual that we had been doing that church year. There was a table in front with glass and stones and a frame, and Gay Walker led us all in gluing those bits of glass together, creating beauty out of brokenness. And that day, Josh Holcomb was providing our music. He looped and layered strings and words and rhythms over each other. And to me, standing right about here, watching people make the mosaic with the music looping became almost trance-like. And that feeling of profound kinship happened again. That sense of oneness. I knew that we were all connected in this room, in this community, but also beyond, to everything, to all of life. And each of us is vital, and our joy and beauty and repair mattered so much. I knew each of us to be holy in that moment. And it's hard to talk about these moments because it is so hard to put them into words. They are a thing that I feel, that they're in my chest solidly and my limbs are tingling. And I mean, the whole point is you can't really describe them well. They're these moments when our regular awarenesses and understandings, the things we're used to using language for, fall away, and we see and experience and know a different sort of truth, something that feels more profound. And for me, these moments are moments of realization, when something that I maybe suspected to be true in my head lands here in a new way of knowing it to be true. Becomes part of who I am almost. And I know something, I know that spiritual truth in a similar way to how I know who I love, where it isn't something like thought through, but just visceral and known and in my body. And this is mysticism, as I fumble to describe it. One of the primary ways of religious knowing. So I'm going to give you some other people with their words trying to describe this thing that is, I think, fundamentally indescribable if you have not experienced it. But if you have, you know. This is from Bertrand Russell, who was a British mathematician and philosopher. And he was a humanist who had mystical experiences. He writes, "All who are capable of absorption in an inward passion must have experienced at times the strange feeling of unreality in common objects, the loss of contact with daily things, in which the solidity of the outer world is lost, and the soul seems, in loneliness, to bring forth out of its own depths the mad dance of fantastic phantoms, which have hitherto appeared independently real and living. The first and most direct outcome of the moment of illumination, he continues, is the belief in the possibility of a way of knowledge, which may be called revelation or insight or intuition, as contrasted with sense, reason, and analysis, which are regarded as blind guesses leading to the morass of illusion. Closely connected with this belief is the conception of a reality behind the world of appearance and utterly different from it. Our Unitarian Universalist Association lists 6 sources of our faith, which include direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder, affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. Every wisdom tradition has a mystical tradition within it. There are Muslim mystics, like the Sufi whose story we told, Jewish mystics, Buddhist mystics, Christian mystics, atheist mystics. If you can think of a way of religious or a-religious knowing, there's probably mysticism within it of one sort or another. And that direct experience of transcendent mystery and wonder takes many forms. Alan Parcells saw it in a computer screen, displaying a farewell image of his wife. Mary Montgomery Clifford experienced it in 7th grade and her world changed. I find that mystery, that moment, most reliably in religious ritual, which probably has a lot to say to inform why I'm here and why this is my profession. And many, many folks have mystical experiences in nature. In that Four Faiths curriculum, Fred Campbell writes, the mystics I know usually base their mysticism upon a base of naturalism. But naturalism is not the only base of mysticism. Mystics have the ability to experience the natural world and also know a unity, a presence, or a power which science does not talk about. Mystics experience spiritual dimensions to living and to their interaction with our world. There's a felt community between self and others and things. This felt bond is so strong that an individual who experiences it cannot ignore it. However, not everyone is capable of feeling it. The values of mystics derive from this experience of community, which is their transcendent reference system. Mystical experiences are common. In surveys, about half of the adults in our country say they've had a mystical experience of some sort. And I imagine numbers are higher than that because it would feel like a strange thing to admit on a survey to a stranger. But people can have these experiences and not make them their primary source of religious knowing, of course. Alan Parcells is an example of that, a scientific naturalist who nonetheless has had these mystical moments. One of the dangers of mysticism, of a mystic approach to the world, is mistaking those mystical experiences for the totality of spiritual truth and only seeking those experiences instead of seeking truth and doing the disciplined work that our experiences of that oneness call us to. In the Buddhist tradition, those mystical spiritual experiences, like the ones I described, are called satori. A satori is a moment where we experience a new way of seeing, a moment that throws everything around us into new perspective. And these satori moments usually happen at the very beginning of a journey towards enlightenment. They are not the end. They're more of a, oh, you're starting. Here's a little experience to keep you on your path. And after the Satori moment, one is not done. One must then commit to the path to enlightenment. In the words of world religion scholar Houston Smith, the next task after the Satori is to infuse the temporal with the eternal, to widen the doors of perception so the wonder of the Satori experience can flood the everyday world. So to do the work you need to, so you feel that oneness, not just in these peak moments, but over and over and over again, and let that knowledge inform the way you live. So mystics both contribute to our religious community and need our community. Mystics invite us all to pay attention to our senses and our bodies. They are the ones often who make sure that the music that we have feels good and doesn't just have good words. They invite us to slow and be present and to notice. And at their best, mystics remind us with word and action how deeply connected we are to each other. And mystics need community. They and we need people who don't let us take our Satori moments too seriously. They and we need people who remind us that the values of our mystical experience should not be measured in how they make us feel, but in how we put that profound sense of kinship and oneness into action. Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg has a wonderful coming of age memoir called Surprised by God: How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Religion. And part of her path into becoming a rabbi was Buddhist meditation. And she had a number of those Satori moments and would go to her teacher thinking that, oh, she'd found some great spiritual truth, and he would take her down a notch and tell her to continue the discipline. She writes, spiritual pyrotechnics, these nifty, fantastical tricks and experiences go down smooth. And for a lot of people, they're valuable as access into a different way of relating to the world. They're a shiny toy that entices us to ask new sorts of questions and lower our guard, that help us to circle the perimeter of the divine palace, and more important, to go looking for the keys to its inner chambers. These incidents are not the keys themselves, but they often lead us closer to them, and that's not a bad thing. She continues, but the danger lies in confusing these feel-good episodes for the path itself, as did the priest in a famous Zen story. The founder of our sect, boasted the priest, had such miraculous powers that he held a brush in his hand on one bank of the river, and his attendant held up paper on the other, and the teacher wrote the holy name of a Buddha through the air. Can you do such a wonderful thing? And the master Benki replied lightly, that is not the manner of Zen. My miracle is that when I feel hungry, I eat. And when I feel thirsty, I drink. Spiritual pyrotechnics are fun, but at best, focusing only on this kind of encounter leaves us out of whack. And at worst, it misses the point entirely. Mystical experiences are vitally important to those who have them and who orient their life around them. And they must move us beyond that internal knowing to impact the world outside our own perception. When the miracle becomes, as Benkei says, when I feel hungry, I eat, and when I feel thirsty, I drink, or when that moment of connection inspires one to make sure that everyone who is hungry has food and everyone who is thirsty has drink. You can see how mysticism and the profound understanding of our connection that it brings, and the reflection of Mary as she shared her life's work growing out of that mystical experience, to love one another, to make the love and the connection that she knows is true real in the world. So may all of us know in our heads and in our chests and in our bones and wherever else our knowing lives, that we are profoundly connected to each other, that we are one. And may we use those bodies, our minds, our energy to make that not only an inner truth, but an outward reality. May it be so. May we make it so. And amen.
There is more love. There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. And lastly, there is more joy. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. And I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere.
So as we return to the world, I invite us to go out in search of more joy, more love, more peace, more hope, whether that is in the world somewhere or just in our own hearts. And when we find it, to share it with others so they might have more peace, more joy, more love, and more hope as well. Let us go in peace and go in love.